My husband surprised me one day by saying he wanted to use the $1 million I inherited to renovate our family home. He said with a grin. I was stunned, barely able to speak. My father had passed away, leaving me the inheritance, but I hadn't told my husband about it. I'd been considering divorcing him because he was too controlling, and I didn't want him knowing about the money since he was always greedy for it. But how did he find out? When I asked him, he confessed to threatening my mother to spill the secret. I couldn't believe his audacity. I fumed as I'd argued with my husband, but he just smirked and said, "Doesn't matter what you think. The deal's done. Your yelling won't change a thing." Now, I'm Caroline, 28 years old, working at a big bank. Always wanted to tie the knot, but my busy job didn't leave much time for dating. So I took a chance and signed up with a matchmaking agency. That's where I met Robert, a cheerful delivery driver a year older than me. In my line of work, I hardly meet any women. Meeting someone like you, Caroline, is like hitting the jackpot, Robert said, blushing. I feel the same way. It's wonderful to hear you say that, I replied. Would you go out with me? With marriage in mind, Robert popped the question. I said yes, and our love story began smoothly. We tied the knot 3 years back. At first, I thought we were a loving pair. I made more money than Robert, but he always praised me, saying, Caroline, you're amazing, such a career woman. But 3 years into our marriage, Robert's attitude changed. He started with sarcastic jabs like, must be nice, earning that big salary. And it wasn't just him. My once friendly in-laws turned cold. They used to be so sweet. Caroline, working at a major bank is impressive. You must have worked hard. We're thrilled our son married you, they'd say. Thanks. I'm lucky to have Robert, I'd reply. We're looking forward to having a great relationship with you, my mother-in-law would say, with a warm smile. At first, both my in-laws seemed so supportive, looking at us with loving eyes. Though issues with mothers-in-law are often talked about, I never thought it would concern me. But soon enough, their true colors showed. Caroline, you make good money, right? Give us some. I want a designer bag. It's not a big deal to help us out once in a while, my mother-in-law demanded, as if it were expected. But I just got you a dress for your birthday recently, and I don't lend or borrow money, even within family, I replied. They were furious when I refused. How dare you? We only agreed to this marriage because you work at a big bank. Truth is, we can't stand you. Sick of you always speaking your mind so clearly, my mother-in-law shouted. Exactly. What's the point of a daughter-in-law who won't give us money? Giving gifts for birthdays is expected. We're telling you to hand over cash. Even after we've asked so many times, you still won't give in. You're the worst daughter-in-law, my father-in-law scolded, backing up his wife. Robert simply nodded along with his parents' harsh words and didn't stand up for me. To add to that, he often splurged on takeout and expensive furniture without consulting me, saying, you make good money, so this should be fine. It wouldn't have been a problem if he used his own earnings, but his salary couldn't cover it all, leaving me to foot the bill. With the constant mistreatment from Robert and his parents, divorce started seeming like the only way out. Since we didn't have kids yet, I felt the decision wasn't as complicated, so I began preparing for the divorce. When I brought up the topic to Robert, he'd avoided it and refused to confront the situation. Divorce? I'm too tired today. I'm going to bed. He'd brush it off. Wait, Robert. We need to seriously discuss this today, I'd insist. But he'd ignore me and quickly retreat to the bedroom, persistently avoiding the conversation. I got a call from my mom during that time. Hi, Mom. What's going on? Listen carefully. It's about your dad. According to her, a recent checkup revealed that my father was sick and needed urgent hospitalization. Got it. I'll head to the hospital right away, I said, rushing to prepare. As I was getting ready to leave, Robert asked where I was going, and I explained about my dad's situation, but he just replied with a nonchalant Disappointed by Robert's lack of concern, especially considering it was about his father-in-law, I focused on going to the hospital without paying him any more mind. When I got there, I joined my mom to hear the doctor's diagnosis. Turns out my dad had cancer, and his time was limited. Both Mom and I were stunned. We debated whether to tell him the truth about his condition, but knowing he'd want to be fully informed, we decided to be honest with him. Returning home devastated, I was met with Robert's insensitive question. "Back from your dad's hospital, huh? How bad is it?" Despite my anger at his tone, I shared the grim news about my father. His response was callous. "Oh, weren't you talking about divorce? If you want to stress out your already ailing father with our divorce, I'm up for it any time." His despicable comment plummeted my feelings for him even lower. But I didn't want to burden my father further. Despite Robert's smug claims about being ready for divorce, whenever we discussed it, he seemed even more pleased. With my workload and a desire to avoid divorce discussions, I focused on being there for my father. Avoiding the topic of divorce seemed like a victory to Robert, worsening his attitude. "So, what about your dad's inheritance? How much are we talking about? I'm his son-in-law, so I should get a share, right?" "Can't wait?" Robert asked eagerly. "That's ridiculous. My dad is still alive. How can you even bring that up? Shut up. Don't raise your voice at me." No matter how much I objected, Robert seemed unaffected. His constant speculation about what he might get after my father's passing disgusted me. So, I started staying at my parents' house. I told my mom that I'd be staying there for a while since it was closer to the hospital. After some time, my father passed away after his battle with illness. He left this world peacefully, as if he were asleep. My mom and I cried so much it felt like we'd run out of tears. But with funeral arrangements to be made, we couldn't dwell in our sorrow. I called Robert to inform him about my father's passing and the funeral date. Although I still wanted a divorce, I felt obligated to let him know since we were technically still married. "So, your dad finally passed away. Sorry for your loss. I don't feel like attending the funeral. Too much of a hassle," he said casually. Despite my suspicions, Robert showed no signs of sadness. I had hoped he would at least come to the funeral, but it seemed even that was asking too much. Seeing his indifference, I not only lost any remaining feelings for him, but began to detest him. I regretted marrying a man who concealed such a cruel side. "Do whatever you want," I replied, surprised by my own coldness. "Why are you so upset?" "Oh, and I'm curious about the inheritance," Robert taunted. Unable to bear his mocking laughter, I cut him off and ended the call. In the end, Robert didn't show up for my father's funeral. Some called him heartless, but I believed it was for the best that he stayed away and didn't tarnish my father's final farewell. In truth, I felt relieved he didn't attend. After the funeral, a family meeting was arranged, including my mother and me, to discuss the inheritance. There were talks about who would receive what, but since my father had made decisions before his passing, everything was settled smoothly. Feeling like I had finally found some closure, I decided to head back home. But as soon as Robert saw me, he dropped a bombshell. "Hey, it's been a while. I've decided to use the $1 million you inherited to renovate the family house." "What?" I was so taken aback that my voice faltered. I hadn't discussed the inheritance situation with Robert. How did he know about the $1 million? And why was he planning to spend it on home renovations? Still reeling from the shock, I asked Robert, "What do you mean? I have no idea about any large sum of money." With a chuckle, Robert responded, "I had a chat with your mom. I may have nudged her a bit, hinting that if she didn't spill the beans about the inheritance, I might consider divorce. She quickly spilled everything. It turned out that Robert had coerced my mother into revealing details about the inheritance. You're despicable, threatening my mother like that just to find out. That's a low blow," I exclaimed, my voice rising without me even realizing it. "I don't care. The renovations are already underway with that $1,000,000. You did what?" "Yep, lucky me for snagging that cash." "Good thing we're still hitched," Robert retorted smugly. While I was preoccupied with funeral arrangements and other tasks, Robert had already arranged for the renovations using the inheritance. I was speechless. You're obsolete now, but I'm feeling generous. You have two options: move in with my folks or file for divorce. Robert's smirk was downright repulsive. I sighed deeply and replied calmly, I choose divorce, but I won't regret it. Robert laughed dismissively, as if I'd regret anything. With that, he handed me a lawyer's business card. From now on, we'll handle everything through this lawyer. And don't forget to transfer the inheritance to my account, he added. Silently, I packed my belongings and left. Even as I walked out the door, Robert kept reminding me, don't forget about the inheritance. When I recounted everything to my mother, she seemed taken aback. She hadn't realized how strained things were between Robert and me. She also apologized for divulging details about the inheritance to Robert. It's all right, Mom. I should have told you everything, but Robert threatening you is the worst part. I reassured her, then asked if I could stay at our family home until I found a new place. She readily agreed. The following day, my phone buzzed incessantly with calls from Robert, all of which I ignored. Eventually, Robert showed up at my parents' house, ringing the doorbell persistently and causing a commotion. Despite my attempts to ignore him, Robert refused to leave and continued to shout loudly outside. Hey, open the door. I know you're in there. Feeling overwhelmed by his aggressive behavior, my mother suggested, Caroline, maybe you should talk to him to prevent any further disturbance for the neighbors. It might not lead to anything productive, but if things escalate, we'll call the police. All right, I understand, I replied reluctantly. With Robert showing no signs of leaving, I reluctantly opened the door partially, leaving the security chain latched. This is getting out of hand, Caroline. When are you transferring that $1 million? I can't afford the renovations without it, Robert shouted, attempting to shake the door and break the chain. Remaining calm, I responded to Robert, it's under consideration. Confused by my reply, Robert looked puzzled and asked, what do you mean, under consideration? I confronted him with the truth, saying, what I inherited was my father's vacation house. It's not in cash, so I can't transfer it to you. Robert's eyes widened in shock. But then, I had something that surprised me too. How did you manage to secure a $1 million renovation contract? Usually, they wouldn't agree without proof of funds. Well, I have a relative who owns a construction company. I mentioned I'd be receiving $1 million soon, so they skipped the usual checks, Robert explained, looking stunned. If that's the case, remember when I warned you before we decided to divorce? I reminded him. I did warn you properly. You've got to be kidding me. I already paid a deposit of $3,000. I planned to pay the rest in installments, but now I can't. What am I supposed to do? Robert panicked, continuing to fuss. The wife's property is the husband's too, right? Even if it's not in cash, hand over that $1 million vacation home. We're still married, right? You've got it all wrong, Robert. Inherited property isn't shared, it's solely mine. Not a cent goes to you. And just so we're clear, we're not a couple anymore. We're total strangers, I asserted firmly. Upon hearing this, Robert's expression shifted from despair to rage, his face turning beet red as he began screaming louder than ever. Stop playing games. I'm calling off the divorce. Give me the inheritance right now, he demanded, attempting to grab me through the door gap. Witnessing the altercation, my mother swiftly dialed the police. Robert withdrew his arm upon hearing her on the phone, but then smirked unexpectedly. I'm done with you, he sneered before fleeing the scene. After he left, the police arrived. While the doorbell camera footage seemed to suggest action would be taken, the officers advised me to prioritize my safety and to avoid engaging with Robert in the future, regardless of the circumstances. They instructed me to keep the doors locked and, if necessary, pretend I wasn't home. 3 days later, I received another call from the police regarding the documentation concerning my father's real estate. When I returned to my parents' house after divorcing Robert, I had put the real estate documents in my bag, only to discover they had vanished. Upon being informed that the documents were found, I headed to the police station where Robert was unexpectedly present. To my shock, It turned out that Robert was the thief who stole the documents. As I demanded an explanation, exasperated, Robert wore a sullen expression and muttered, "You thought there might be cash in my bag since I inherited $1 million, right? So when you went through my stuff, you stumbled upon some important-looking documents related to the inheritance and decided to take them." Robert explained that he hadn't examined the documents closely at the time. It was only after learning from me that the $1 million wasn't in cash, but a vacation house that he realized the documents he took were the property title of that house. Later, Robert, assuming that selling the property title would convert the inheritance into cash, took it to a real estate agent, accompanied by my in-laws, to initiate the selling process. However, upon my arrival, the realtor informed me that since the title was still in my father's name, they couldn't proceed with the sale. As the inheritance division discussion had just taken place, I was in the process of finding a notary to transfer the title to my name. Even if the inheritance had been finalized, the property would still be under my name, making it difficult for Robert to sell it without my consent. In frustration, I demanded that they purchase the property since it belonged to my father-in-law. Their response was to call the police on me, likely due to Robert's aggressive behavior, which raised suspicion among the employees. As I stood in shock, Robert began making absurd claims to the police officer. I was just trying to sell it on her behalf. I didn't steal anything. I haven't done anything wrong. Please let me go, he pleaded, contradicting his earlier admission of taking the documents. Remaining composed, I clarified to the officer, that's not true. I didn't ask him to sell anything. He stole it on his own. Plus, the documents he took were just copies, not the originals. Even if he tried, he couldn't have sold them. You set me up. Don't play games with me, Robert shouted furiously, spitting in anger. I responded icily. What are you even talking about? You stole on your own, and now all you do is spout nonsense. Just face the consequences of your criminal actions. Frustrated, Robert bit his lip, and as a result, he was arrested for theft. With news of Robert's arrest and the loss of the $3,000 deposit broadcasted, my in-laws, now exposed as the parents of a criminal, were compelled to relocate from their town. Later, they seemed to hold a grudge against the real estate agency that reported Robert, resorting to making harassing calls and spreading rumors. The real estate agency, understandably outraged, filed a lawsuit against them for obstructing business and attempted fraud, as they had tried to sell property they didn't own. To avoid a court case, my in-laws had to pay a significant amount in damages. In their desperation, they reached out to me for help. Caroline, please. We used up our savings for the deposit, and now we're in debt to pay the settlement. My ex-mother-in-law's voice trembled with urgency, but I felt no sympathy. Why are you asking me for help? I'm divorced from Robert, and as far as I'm concerned, you're strangers to me now. I responded firmly. She pleaded, You're wealthy, aren't you? Can't you spare some money? We'll pay you back, I promise. I don't believe that for a second. I'm ending this call. Don't contact me again, I replied coldly, before hanging up and blocking both their numbers. Robert's number had been blocked long ago. Knowing Robert knew where my parents lived, I decided to sell our family home and moved with my mother for safety. As for the $1 million vacation house, I put it back on the market, and it sold without any issues. Now my mother and I live peacefully, cherishing the memories of my father.
My name is John Olson, and I'm 49 years old, working at a trading company with a prominent national brand. One day, the branch president called me into his office. John, you've been transferred. Transferred? To where? They want you back at headquarters. I see. I've just started building solid connections here after 2 years. I know it's tough. I'll miss you too, but this is a direct order. You need to visit headquarters first to get acquainted with your new role. Returning to the headquarters after 2 years felt surreal. The place was as immaculate as ever, and I could hardly believe how much time had passed. I waited in the conference room for my new boss, but after 30 minutes, no one had arrived. Finally, a woman entered. Mr. Olson, I'm Mary Emerson from HR. Nice to meet you. She introduced herself with a curt bow and made no apology for her lateness. You know, you still have the option to decline this position at headquarters. Excuse me? What do you mean? Manager Emerson responded with a dismissive laugh. People like you might not fit in at headquarters. Maybe you should have stayed comfortable at the branch, she said. Her words gave me a headache. What was her problem? I'm determined to give it my best at headquarters. Manager Emerson snorted in disapproval. My official return to headquarters was scheduled for a month later. Despite the sadness of leaving, I was eager to start. Ideally, I would have attended some training sessions, but I had been too busy with handovers and tasks at the branch to get any introductions. I felt a bit anxious about starting without proper preparation. Still, I was glad to be back at headquarters. On my first day, rather than heading straight to the office, I waited in the conference room for Manager Emerson, as we were supposed to go to the workplace together. She'd arrived on time and seemed surprisingly disappointed to see me. You actually showed up, she remarked, her tone cold. I bowed, enduring her rudeness. I'm looking forward to working with you. Let me be clear, you might not be suited for this position at headquarters. Remember, we're one of the top companies in the nation. I understand. Few people make it to headquarters, most are stationed at the branches. That was certainly true. Only a small fraction of applicants make it to headquarters, most are assigned to branches. Securing a transfer to headquarters is a rare achievement and carries a certain prestige. Actually, I worked at headquarters until 2 years ago, I said. So, you were demoted to a branch? It's surprising to see you back here. I chose not to explain the details of my transfer, as it wasn't a demotion. I noticed from your records that you only completed middle school. Yes, that's correct. Manager Emerson shook her head, clearly in disbelief. How could someone with just a middle school education hold a position at headquarters? Did you use any underhanded methods? That's not the case. It's not possible to work at headquarters with only a middle school education without some form of deceit in the hiring process. Manager Emerson approached me aggressively. No, I didn't. I excelled in the test. Please refrain from making baseless accusations. I'll be sure to dig into your background. It looks like I've encountered a challenging individual. By the way, my daughter also works here. Oh, I see. How did you know about that? I asked. Well, there have been some rumors, Manager Emerson replied. Her demeanor shifted to one of satisfaction upon hearing my response. Really? My daughter is quite well known here. She's exceptional and a source of great pride for me. With a sudden boost in her mood, Manager Emerson led me to the office. When we arrived at the HR department, the situation was far from over. I stood in front of the HR staff during the morning assembly, where Manager Emerson introduced me. This is John Olson. He'll be joining our department effective immediately. I look forward to working with him. The staff members responded with awkward bows. Manager Emerson then smiled slyly. Given his middle school education, feel free to treat him as you would a servant. He's only useful for that, she said with a chuckle. I raised my head slowly. I look forward to working with you all. The staff exchanged uneasy glances. A more senior employee hesitated before speaking up. Madam, what should we do with him? Manager Emerson responded with indifference. How should we handle it? The staff member looked at me for guidance, and I interjected. I apologize for not introducing myself properly, Manager. John Olson, the middle school dropout. Does that not suffice? Manager Emerson continued to laugh. No, I haven't mentioned everything, I said, handing my business card to someone. My name is John Olson, and I work as an audit officer. Please remember that. An auditor? She asked, clearly surprised. Yes, I replied with a confident smile. Manager Emerson's expression tightened. She looked around to gauge the staff's reactions. That can't be true. You can never hold a position as an audit officer. Why are you so certain? In reality, I am an officer. Feel free to verify with your superiors if you have any doubts. Manager Emerson looked taken aback. I was hoping to keep this a secret. After all, my role involves conducting audits. I should have warned everyone in advance. The staff bowed their heads in apology. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. No, it's not your fault. It's understandable that everyone in HR would recognize me since I was here until 2 years ago. I regret not anticipating this. The staff seemed relieved by my comments. Why does everyone seem to believe he really is an audit officer? Are you all trying to deceive me? I asked. Why would we do that? What would be the benefit? Manager Emerson, however, refused to listen. How could a middle school dropout become an audit officer at a major company like ours? It's ridiculous, she said with a laugh. Let me clarify, said one of the staff members. This is John Olson, the audit officer. He achieved top marks in the entrance exam. Manager Emerson chuckled again. My daughter also excelled in exams. Does that mean she should be an officer immediately? No. When Audit Officer Olson was only 15, he outperformed many college graduates. That's what makes his achievement remarkable. What? So he's just good at academics. It's not just about academics. Officer Olson was highly effective in the sales department. He built crucial connections with our most important Chinese business partners from scratch. It's not an exaggeration to say he played a key role in elevating our company to one of the top positions in the country. He has numerous other accomplishments as well. The staff member spoke with enthusiasm about my achievements. Despite feeling uncomfortable, it was important to support my claims. Manager Emerson's expression darkened as the staff member continued. Recognized for these accomplishments, he became the youngest audit officer ever appointed. At last, Manager Emerson seemed to grasp the situation. So your transfer to the branch 2 years ago was related to? Yes, it was for my auditing duties. Excuse me, but what exactly does an audit officer do? My role involves addressing any misconduct among employees, including high-level executives. I can't go into specifics, but there were particular reasons for my transfer to the branch. Manager Emerson bowed her head briefly. I apologize for any misunderstandings. That's all right. Just remember, it's important not to judge people solely based on their education. It doesn't benefit anyone. Yes, I'll keep that in mind, Manager Emerson said, lifting her head slowly. But why has an audit officer come to our HR department? Realizing there was no avoiding it, I replied, of course, for auditing purposes. And it happens that this HR department is the subject of the audit. The HR staff became visibly uneasy. Manager Emerson was the first to object. Wait, there's nothing wrong with our HR department. I see the employees calming down. I'm not suggesting there's an issue with the entire HR department. Then what are you implying? It means that the investigation is focused on a specific part within HR. Manager Emerson's expression tightened. You mean it's me? Her eyes widened in shock. What could I have possibly done to deserve this? Don't make such accusations. I've already reflected on my judgments and vowed never to repeat them. Of course, it's not solely about that. I wouldn't be here just for that reason. From now on, I'll discuss this matter privately with you. Everyone else, please return to your work. As I spoke, the staff returned to their tasks, their murmurs lingering in the air. I followed Manager Emerson into another room to continue our discussion. What was that about? Manager Emerson asked, her face flushed with anger. I was approached by the sales department manager with a concern. There's a problematic employee in the sales department, Nicole Emerson, your daughter. Manager Emerson looked away abruptly. My daughter? What about her? She seems to have several issues. She lacks common sense and knowledge. Her attitude is poor, and she apparently has no motivation to work. Exactly, I confirmed. Manager Emerson immediately protested. I can't do anything about that. As her parent, I can't oversee her at work. I find it hard to believe what the sales department manager is saying. She's an excellent and proud daughter. So you believe the sales department manager is spreading false rumors? I asked. That's right. My daughter graduated from a prestigious private university. How can she lack knowledge and common sense? Are you suggesting we should judge based on education alone? No, of course not. I do believe that most people with strong educational backgrounds are capable. So do you think the sales department manager is mistaken? I asked, shaking my head. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. We didn't rely solely on the sales manager's opinion. We conducted our own investigation beforehand. An investigation? Yes, my team observed Nicole's performance and found that the sales manager's concerns were valid. Manager Emerson began to sweat. Is that true? Yes, unfortunately, she's not meeting the standards required for our company. Manager Emerson, however, continued to defend her daughter. Even the most talented individuals can be influenced by their environment. Indeed, that might be true. I'm sure my daughter isn't getting along with her manager or colleagues, Or perhaps she's too talented and is being ostracized. In such a situation, it's difficult to perform well, which can lead to a negative attitude. I nodded in agreement. That's a possibility we can't ignore. Therefore, I'm planning to transfer Nicole to this HR department. Under my guidance, she can better showcase her abilities. It's beneficial for both the employee and the company to be in the right role. That's certainly true, Manager Emerson said with a satisfied smile. I'll have my daughter submit a transfer request immediately. Wait a moment, I interrupted as she reached for the phone. What's the matter? We need to act quickly. It's possible Nicole's performance has been affected by her current environment. That's what I've been saying, Manager Emerson replied, clearly frustrated. However, we need to consider another possibility. And what's that? It's possible she might not have met our company's hiring standards in the first place. Manager Emerson leaned back and laughed. What do you mean? That would imply there was an issue with the recruitment process. If that's the case, it's a serious problem. Yes, it is. But what we suspect isn't just a mistake in the process. Then what is it? We believe there might have been some wrongdoing. Excuse me? Are you suggesting misconduct in the recruitment process? That's impossible. Anger flashed in Manager Emerson's eyes. I won't tolerate any further insults to my daughter. I assure you, these aren't baseless claims. There are troubling facts that point in this direction. What facts? In our investigation of Nicole, we found her level of knowledge alarmingly low. It's questionable whether she even has a college education. I presented some documents. Here are samples of work she produced in the sales department, errors and typos that are hard to ignore. Additionally, her basic knowledge has been called into question during conversations with other employees. Manager Emerson snorted in disapproval. That's just personal perception. Typos could be simple mistakes or computer errors. While Nicole should have reviewed her work, concluding she lacks common sense based on that is unfair. I handed Manager Emerson a piece of paper and said, true, errors can occur. However, Nicole has achieved something quite remarkable in a particular area. Manager Emerson looked at the document, visibly stunned. She worked hard to prepare for the test and interview. That's the result of her efforts, Manager Emerson defended. If that's the case, it's impressive. But are you suggesting that all that knowledge just disappeared after she joined the company? That seems unlikely, I replied. So what are you implying? Her test results were outstanding. And that's a fact, Manager Emerson retorted. That's why we suspect there might have been misconduct, I said firmly. Misconduct? What could my daughter possibly have done? Nicole couldn't have done it alone. A manager in HR could have conveyed test content and interview points to their daughter, right? Manager Emerson's face turned pale as I said this. There's no way I would do such a thing, she insisted. It's difficult to believe otherwise, I replied, maintaining my composure. Look, I don't know what you're trying to achieve as an audit officer, but do you have any evidence? Evidence? I echoed, somewhat taken aback. Yes, you've been making claims, but it's all just conjecture, isn't it? Do you have any proof? I shook my head. Unfortunately, I don't have concrete evidence that I communicated test content to my daughter. That's why I came to HR, hoping to find some. But it seems that won't be possible now. Manager Emerson smirked triumphantly. Don't worry, you won't find any evidence because there's nothing to find. I sighed deeply. I don't want to escalate this, but... What? Are you planning to proceed without evidence? We have no choice but to verify it directly. Seeing Manager Emerson's confusion, I clarified. We'll require Nicole to retake the recruitment test, only the written exam this time. Manager Emerson's face went pale. What? Have her retake the test? Yes, I confirmed. That's unnecessary. She already passed the written exam. Why should she retake it? Because there's a possibility she might have cheated. If Nicole truly earned her top scores through her own ability, she should have no trouble with a new test we've prepared. It's a different test, but of similar difficulty. But she's been working diligently, Manager Emerson protested. Unfortunately, Nicole doesn't seem to have the necessary motivation. It doesn't matter if she lacks knowledge or if she may have cheated to get in. If she were working properly, the sales manager wouldn't have raised concerns. The core issue is her lack of motivation. Manager Emerson looked at me with a pained expression. So you're doing this to fire her? It's not about firing her. It's about taking appropriate action. The problem appears to lie more with you, Manager Emerson, than with Nicole. With me? Manager Emerson seemed bewildered. Yes, if you, as the HR manager, use your position to get your daughter into the company, it undermines our company's credibility. We need to address this before it becomes public. What will happen? In the worst case, both you and Nicole could face termination. Manager Emerson began to cry. Wait, please listen to me. What is it? I didn't want this, Nicole insisted, and I couldn't refuse. I thought if she failed at her job, I would resign myself. It's true, I did it. Manager Emerson reluctantly admitted her actions, revealing her desperation to help her daughter, even at the cost of her own integrity. No more excuses. We'll conduct a thorough investigation and determine the appropriate disciplinary action for both of you. Until then, you're to stay home and await further instructions. Manager Emerson left with a downcast expression. Nicole, on the other hand, was informed and seemed relieved by the prospect of leaving early. She departed from the company. The investigation confirmed the misconduct. Manager Emerson had indeed shared tests and interview details with her daughter. As a result, Manager Emerson was demoted and transferred to a branch, while Nicole lost her job. Despite her efforts at the branch, Nicole felt uneasy due to the rumors and eventually resigned, relying on odd jobs for income. Nicole did not seek further employment and was eventually left without a place to stay. As for me, I continued with my audit duties and received recognition for my achievements, eventually earning the position of vice president. My name is Eugene Harrison, and I'm a 35-year-old IT professional with a passion for golf. I joined the company about 6 months ago, where my role primarily involves system development and handling various tasks, such as making copies to support my colleagues. My days are busy and fulfilling, but from the outset, I have been labeled as less than useful. I don't socialize with anyone in my department outside of work, so I usually spend my lunch breaks alone on the rooftop. Things took a turn in April when a personnel change occurred. Our department's former boss was transferred, and Jennifer Parker, a new manager known for her exceptional management skills rather than engineering expertise, took over. The previous boss had complained about engineers working excessive overtime and the associated costs. Jennifer, who is strikingly beautiful and 5 years younger than me, quickly captured the attention of the department. Her inaugural address caused quite a stir among the men, and I was instantly captivated by her presence. Despite the rumors about her looks, she was even more stunning in person, exuding both beauty and competence. Like many of my male colleagues, I became an admirer. However, Jennifer didn't seem to think highly of me. She perceived me as an underperforming employee. It became clear that she was carefully observing everyone to get a grip on the department. Within a week, she started assigning tasks with precision. Over the next month, there was a noticeable reduction in overtime and errors, while morale and job satisfaction improved significantly. I felt a sense of relief, especially since I had often been on the receiving end of previous frustrations. Jennifer's arrival coincided with a project deadline, so the welcome party was delayed by about a month and a half. By then, she had already become well integrated into the department. When the party finally took place, it was casual and lively, with a relaxed, no-holds-barred atmosphere. With the project behind us, spirits were high. I don't drink alcohol at social gatherings, so I sipped on my soft drink while observing everyone progressively getting drunk. Aside from a few new recruits like Sally and her group, not many people engaged with me, though I hoped that might change come winter. During a conversation with the younger staff about travel, Jennifer joined us. She had been encouraged to drink quite a bit and was noticeably inebriated, her usually sharp and focused demeanor replaced by a more disheveled appearance with half-closed eyes. "You had too much to drink, Jennifer," I said, trying to steady her as she struggled to stay upright. The new recruits looked concerned. "I'm not drunk. You're all just teasing me," she giggled, trying to deny her condition. It was clear she was quite tipsy. "Stop talking only to the younger ones, Eugene. Talk to me too, or don't you want to mingle with a younger female boss?" she said, leaning in closer, her words slurred and her balance wavering. I wanted to create some distance, but I was concerned she might fall if I moved away. The new recruits, likely uneasy about the situation with the boss, quickly excused themselves, leaving Jennifer and me alone at a corner table. "Come on, Jennifer, sit up straight," I said, trying to help her balance by gently pushing her shoulders. She swayed and struggled to maintain her posture. "Can't you lend me your shoulder? It's not like it's going anywhere," she mumbled, her words barely coherent as she acted more like a child. Her legs swung around, and one of her high heels flew off and disappeared under the table. Jennifer, surprised by the sudden loss of her shoe, bent down to look for it, her face pressed against the floor. She then burst into laughter, clearly amused by her own antics. "Seriously, Eugene, you always have that serious look, but I can tell you're actually really good at your job," Jennifer said, puffing out her cheeks as she spoke. Her words took me by surprise. As far as I knew, only the CEO was aware of my background, and it seemed unlikely that Jennifer would be informed. Was she picking up on something from my usual behavior? "You're underestimating me," she continued playfully, giving me a weak cat punch. I'm not a fan of alcohol or drugs, and this situation was quickly becoming uncomfortable. "Could someone help me with Jennifer?" I called out to the busy tables around us. A colleague came over to assist. Despite her condition, Jennifer stubbornly clung to my arm. Jane, a colleague who had joined the company at the same time as Jennifer, informed me that she had called Jennifer's sister to pick her up. A taxi was on its way. Jane chuckled, revealing that Jennifer, despite her low tolerance, had a fondness for alcohol. By this point, Jennifer had started to doze off while still holding onto my arm. "You've become her favorite," Jane laughed, observing the scene. About 15 minutes later, Jennifer's pickup arrived. "I apologize for the trouble my sister has caused," a woman who resembled Jennifer said when she arrived. Her demeanor was markedly different, not at all like a corporate worker. "I'm Kate, Jennifer's sister. I'm really sorry for any inconvenience she's caused," she said, her apology making me feel a bit awkward. Kate had a cab waiting outside the bar, so I helped Jennifer into it. During this time, I noticed that Kate kept glancing at me, which made me feel somewhat uneasy. "Is there something on my face?" I asked, checking my face with my hand. Kate shook her head and asked, "Are you a systems engineer?" I explained my job to Kate, confirming that I was a systems engineer but mostly handled various tasks. Kate tilted her head in a curious, almost youthful gesture that I found oddly endearing. It reminded me of the uneasy feeling I'd had when I first met Jennifer. The inexplicable discomfort lingered even after they had left in the cab. The next day, as soon as I arrived at work, Jennifer grabbed my arm and said, "I'm really sorry. I heard I was a real bother yesterday." She continued to apologize, which made me feel a bit guilty. "It's no big deal. You were just drunk," I replied, trying to downplay the incident with a joke. It seemed that Jennifer had been scolded by Kate and instructed to apologize to me. "I'm really sorry," Jennifer said, her expression genuinely remorseful. "Don't worry about it. It was just a company party. I didn't mind at all." Jennifer appeared visibly relieved and smiled. Her smile had a different effect on me compared to the night before, but I decided to keep my feelings to myself. About a month and a half had passed since the party. My days continued to be filled with various tasks, but I felt a sense of fulfillment. As usual, I headed to the rooftop for lunch. There was a small chapel located on the rooftop of our building. I always take my lunch on the rooftop, where I offer a daily prayer. Usually, my favorite spot is empty, but today, I found it already occupied by a new employee, Sally. Known for her quick learning among the new hires, she was sitting alone, crying with a trembling voice. I considered leaving her to her privacy, but decided against it. I approached her gently to avoid startling her. She looked up in surprise, then, upon seeing me, seemed to lose her composure and sat back down. "Is everything all right? Did something happen?" I asked, taking a seat beside her. Tears continued to spill from her large eyes. I searched in vain for a handkerchief, then handed her a packet of tissues I had picked up from the subway station on my way to work. "I may not be able to do much, but if you want to talk about it, I'm here," I offered. She sniffled and began to explain. Apparently, she had made a mistake at work and couldn't fix a bug she was responsible for. The security system, which was crucial for a major client's project, was in her hands. I checked the date on my watch. At this rate, she wouldn't meet the deadline. "Have you talked to any senior staff?" "The project is managed by a team, not just one person," I suggested, hoping to offer some practical advice. I suspected that Sally, a new hire, was being overwhelmed with work. She nodded, explaining that she had asked for help, but everyone else was too busy with their own tasks. With the deadline looming, it seemed they were either too envious of her skills or unwilling to assist, leaving her with a crucial responsibility. After some thought, I decided to help her on one condition. She had to keep it a secret that I had assisted her. She was surprised but agreed with a simple, please. That afternoon, I worked on the program between my other tasks. To my relief, I found and fixed the bug fairly quickly. I also made a few additional improvements. By the end of the day, the system program was corrected. I quietly returned it to Sally, who was astonished. What? Already? Keep it a secret, I whispered, placing a finger over my lips. She nodded in understanding. As the deadline approached, everyone was scrambling, and I thought my help would go unnoticed. However, Jennifer, who had been closely monitoring everything, noticed something. The next morning, right after the meeting, she called me over. I was caught off guard. I had underestimated Jennifer's ability to scrutinize and oversee the department. It was a mistake to think I could deceive her. Well, I struggled to find the right words. Jennifer stood up, clearly frustrated. You fixed this program, didn't you, Eugene? She asked, her tone sharp. It's impossible to find and correct a bug and rebuild it in such a short time. What's going on? I looked into your background because I was curious, even the erased parts. Why are you just a general affairs officer when you're clearly more capable than anyone else in this department? Are you trying to make a fool of me? Jennifer couldn't conceal her anger and raised her voice at me. I was puzzled by her reaction. Whether I chose to work or not, and how I use my skills should be my prerogative. To be honest, it seemed an overreaction on Jennifer's part. I was torn between revealing the truth or resigning from my job. Jennifer's irrational anger irked me. Just as I was about to respond, the department door was flung open with a bang. Heavy footsteps approached us. Who made this security program? Demanded a voice. It was Kate. Sally, still trembling, mumbled, "It was me." Kate stormed towards Sally. Seeing Kate's approach, Sally recoiled, her eyes brimming with tears, fearing a reprimand for her mistake. Panicked, I stepped forward. "I thought it was me. I did it," I said, raising my hand to take responsibility. Kate halted and turned to face me, a grin spreading across her face. I thought, "Why, Kate?" I asked, confused. Jennifer explained, Kate is a white hat hacker hired by this company. Her role is to find vulnerabilities by breaking the security systems we built. It turned out Kate had reviewed my program last night and was evidently displeased. Kate, standing before me, studied me intently. "It's been a while, Eugene. Don't you remember me?" As she gathered her long hair into a ponytail, I recognized her. My memories flashed back to high school during a summer coding program in the UK, designed to teach system programming to select students. I recall that she was one of the few younger participants. Although we didn't interact much due to the age gap, she had frequently approached me with questions. That was Kate. Her hacking skills had far exceeded those of the college and high school students I was with, and I had been in awe of her natural talent. It was clear she had a gift that couldn't be matched by mere hard work alone. I decided to stay and study in the UK for the exchange program, and I hadn't seen her since. "Do you work as a handyman here?" Kate asked, her tone dismissive. "Don't be ridiculous," I replied. "I know you have more talent than anyone else here. Why are you holding back?" Kate's frustration was evident. The program was too well done for her liking. "How I use my talent is my business," she retorted. Her irritation was palpable, and I could no longer hide my own frustration. As we glared at each other, Jennifer stepped between us. Without warning, she slapped me across the face with a sharp, resounding smack. For a moment, I was stunned, unable to process what had just happened. When I realized it was Jennifer who had slapped me, I was truly shocked. "Why don't you utilize your talents?" Jennifer demanded, her voice filled with a mix of anger and desperation. "Why? I yearn for that talent so much. I feel like I'm choking, receiving the same gift as Kate." Jennifer's anger seemed to dissipate in an instant, replaced by tears that welled up in her eyes. Despite the conflict, her vulnerability was palpable. Jennifer's words struck a deep chord. I was struggling to understand the connection between her emotions and Kate's talent. It wasn't Kate's fault, and it wasn't Jennifer's either. It felt like a cruel joke from fate that I was caught in the middle. Jennifer dashed out into the hallway. Kate, still looking down, said, "Go after her. Take responsibility. Twins are strange. They always want the same things. I have the best gift, so Eugene, you can give yours to Jennifer." I couldn't see Kate's face, but her words triggered a memory from that summer vacation. I recalled how, on the last day, Kate had wrapped a small piece of wire around my finger and said, "Please remember to find me when we grow up. I'll become your wife." At the time, I thought it was a childish joke and had forgotten about it. "I'm sorry, I have to go," I said, and with those words I hurried after Jennifer. I saw her turning the corner of the hallway and heading up the stairs to the rooftop. "Wait, Jennifer," I called out, but she didn't stop. I heard the loud bang of the rooftop door opening. When I reached the rooftop, I found Jennifer hunched over, hugging her knees beside the small chapel. Her face was buried in her arms. I quietly sat down next to her, giving her the space she needed while offering my silent support. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I said some horrible things earlier. I wanted to apologize for my previous arrogance, even though I knew my apology might come across as another form of arrogance." Jennifer shook her head slightly, signaling that my words weren't necessary. "It's not something you should apologize for, Eugene. I'm sorry for speaking without knowing the full story," she replied, her voice trembling. She raised her head, revealing her red eyes. "Just want you to listen to my story for a little while." As she spoke, I began sharing my own story. I told her about my time working as a systems engineer after returning from the UK. Everything seemed to be going well until a friend, who had started a successful company, began spreading rumors that I had stolen someone else's work. This friend tarnished my reputation and claimed my accomplishments as his own at industry events. It felt like everything I had worked for was slipping away. I became disillusioned and unwilling to trust anyone or use my talents for work. It was the CEO of this company who reached out to me during that low period. We had previously worked together, and he hired me with the understanding that it was okay to take things slowly. This was a story I had never shared with anyone before. Jennifer listened intently, her expression serious as I shared my story. After my confession, I felt an unexpected lightness, as if a burden had been lifted. I told her that despite my hard work, I felt I wasn't good enough compared to someone like Kate. Jennifer explained that she had worked hard to develop her own skills, but it hurt her to see someone like Kate, who seemed to excel effortlessly. Her frustration had been misdirected toward me, and she admitted to taking it out on me. Jennifer's sideways glance, filled with a childlike vulnerability, contrasted sharply with her usual professional demeanor. It was endearing and reminded me of her multifaceted personality. Her confession, "I want to use my talent for you from now on," felt like a lifetime declaration. Jennifer's surprised reaction, her wide eyes and flushed cheeks, was incredibly cute and charming. "Are there any lies in what you just said?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "Of course not. In sickness and in health," I began, but Jennifer's hands stopped me, her face bright red as she looked away. "Isn't that a bit too soon?" she said curtly. "That's how serious I am," I replied. Standing up, I extended my hand to her. Without hesitation, she took it, and the woman who stood before me was now poised and professional once more. "Then start working hard from today. Don't hold back your skills," she said firmly, and I couldn't help but feel that this was the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. As I looked at Jennifer in her wedding dress, radiant and happy, I reflected on how our journey had brought us here. Despite the initial challenges and misunderstandings, we had grown together, supporting each other through our respective struggles. The bond we formed went beyond just professional respect. It turned into something deeply personal and meaningful. "I promise to make you happy. I want you to smile and be in a good mood every day," I said with sincerity. Jennifer's response was a quiet nod, her eyes filled with warmth and assurance. "I'm ready to walk through life together with you from now on," she replied, her voice steady and filled with conviction. Looking back, I realized that working alongside Jennifer had transformed from a challenging experience into a journey of mutual growth and support. As we stood there, ready to embark on our new life together, I felt a profound sense of contentment. The future was bright, and I was grateful for the chance to be by Jennifer's side, sharing in the joys and